Hi, I'm Jerry Ford. It's Thursday night. It's time to learn something new. What are we going to talk about tonight? Well, tonight we're going to talk about a pressing matter, all things pressing. We're going to talk about pressing, how important it is, and how to do it, different tools and tricks. And I'm going to drag out like all of the toys that I have in my sewing room. And without further ado, let's talk about pressing.
Tonight we are going to talk about how pressing things, how we press things, the importance of it, the different tools, and I've got lots of them that I use for pressing. So like, even whether you're a beginner or an advanced sewer, pressing is probably more important than even the sewing, because you can have the most perfect garment or product that you're working on, and if it's badly pressed, it looks homemade. No matter, it just does. When I was a kid, pressing was my job. My mother was a factory, worked for a factory, and they don't press, they give it to someone else. So I was the someone else. So, and actually, whatever you're doing, and it's not good to wait till the end to press. You should press as you're going along. It makes it a little easier. But yeah, you don't want to press as you go along, although at the end, although I tend to do that. Pressing is not the same thing as ironing. Ironing is doing this number, but and that's going to stretch and distort your fabric. Pressing is just an up and down motion. It doesn't distort if you just go up and down and move it. A lot of times I bounce it. I sit there and skim it along and bounce it on top of the ironing board. Ironing boards are different. You can have all kinds. There's portable ones. Okay, this is my favorite to work with because it just works so much nicer. It's one of those wool mats, and the wool mats just work really well. They hold the fabric, they don't distort it. So it's one of my favorite things. Irons, there's different kinds of irons. And I have found the expensive irons don't last any longer than the cheap ones. I've had Alisos, I've had Rowentas, and they all leak. So basically how I get around that is I don't buy a steam iron, or if I do, I don't use it with steam because they're all going to leak. In fact, if I can find, my favorite iron is a Black & Decker that has no holes, no steam, because therefore if you're fusing, a lot of times when you've got a steam iron and you fuse, it leaves little round marks wherever you were fusing, and I don't like that. So a flat iron that has no steam, then you don't have to worry about those little round marks all over your fabric. Also, how I drop things. I drop everything all the time, always have. So I'm hard on irons. So I don't want an iron that's going to have steam. I know it's going to leak. And the expensive ones are a waste of money on me. I've had an Aliso, and I really like the Aliso irons, but they have those little feet that when you take your hand off of it, they raise up so that you don't scorch your surface. Well, the problem is as those begin to wear, those little feet don't retract anymore. So if you run your iron this way, it pleats all along the back. So
Yeah,
that didn't
but
work.
Jerry,
Yeah.
that's the iron I have, and I had no problem with the feet.
Oh, maybe it's because I had the first Aliso when it first came out, and it did have
Because
that.
I do like that iron. I like the fact that it, you can't.
I have a really nice I think it's a Sunbeam iron that has steam, but I don't use it very often. It's in the closet most of the time. It's a spare for whenever I break everything else. Like one of my favorite irons, and I do need to plug it in for a little while here, is this little $12 iron, $12.99 iron that I got at Walmart. And it's that here. What's it called? It's called a Steam Fast. I don't want to get too hot. Steam Fast. This works really well. It's got a few little holes on there, and it does do steam, and it hasn't started leaking, and I must have dropped this at least 20 times already. At least. It's like once every other day I drop it on the floor, or the cat knocks it off. So this one I like to use. That's what I use at my desk. My iron and ironing board is in the other room, so I have to actually get up. Another iron that I use a lot, which I don't have plugged in today because I'm not going to use it, is the little Clover irons. I use these a lot. So I like the little clove.
What do you use those for?
Whenever I've got something really small that I need to get into. I also use it to set rhinestones. I'll just sit, hold it on there. And then you know what I like to use it when I have the needle turn and I'm sort of pushing it along the edges and going around to fold it over. That's when I use this. I'm dealing with a little tiny place. I'm not real bad about burning your fingers, but they do have these finger protectors that you can also buy. And I had some, but I can't find them, or I think I gave them away because I never used them. And I remember a friend of mine was always burning her fingers, so I gave them to her. So I don't have those anymore, but those are helpful if you are doing a lot of close work and you're having trouble with burning your fingers. So, okay, let's see. Anything? I've got some handouts that I will send you an email if you're watching later and I don't have your comments, or if it's on the YouTube, send me an email at waltzquilt@yahoo.com and I'll be happy to send you a copy of these 2 handouts, because there's all kinds of links to all different kinds of articles you know, that are talking about ironing and pressing. Let's see, general pressing tips. You want to make sure you're using the temperature appropriate for your fabric and your adhesive. A lot of times we'll use like Steam-A-Seam or Wonder Under, and some of those we tend to want to put it on the hottest setting at all, that it can give you. Well, sometimes that's going to make it just melt through your fabric and it's not going to really adhere anything. Another thing too is some of them say use steam, some of them don't use steam. So go ahead and look at the manufacturer's instructions as to what settings you use. If you're not sure, do a swatch. If you're not, polyesters, for garment sewing, polyesters are sort of the norm. You can't really get a whole lot of fabric that doesn't have polyester or nylon, and both of those will melt. So be careful of always test it, you know, when you're working on something. Try to press on the wrong side of your fabric so that if you scorch it, you at least won't see it from the front. Try not to press over pins, especially if you've got a Teflon coated iron, because pins will go ahead and pull that Teflon coating off. I've done that before. And also if you have the plastic headed pins, you can melt the plastic heads to your fabric. I've done that before too. So like I said, it's best to press from the back. Whenever you have a seam or anything, you want to press that seam flat first and then open the seam to whether it be open or to one side or the other. Since most of us are embroiders, when you're pressing for embroidery, you want to do it either on a wool mat like this, or you want to get a towel, double fold a towel and press from the wrong side of the fabric. If you're getting any pulling, you can try clipping the jump stitches on the back. If you know, sometimes you get more jump stitches on that don't cut on the back. If you're getting, especially with lettering, a lot of times when I get puckering with lettering, they don't cut the jump stitches for a lot of the lettering because it's too close together. So if you go and you cut your stabilizer as well as your jump stitches and then press it, a flatter email, you'll get a flatter embroidery. And you can use steam. Again, if you're dealing with polyester thread, and especially bobbin thread, most bobbin threads are polyester, don't use high heat because it's going to melt. Oh, embroidery. Also, you can spray the back with a little bit of spray starch. So as you press it, it'll make it stay. That helps. Cleaning irons. There's all kinds of stuff on the market for cleaning irons. The 2 things I use the most is if I catch whatever I've gooked it up with, I will use one of those magic erasers, those was it Mr. Clean magic erasers,
Yeah.
and run that over the top. That will get it, if you get it right away. Once it's dried and hardened and turned nasty brown, yeah, it's not going to work real well. There's all kinds of toys you can use for doing a seam. Here's a curved seam. So things you can use to do a curved seam is, okay, first you want to press it flat. And you want to determine whether you want to press it open or you press it closed. Either way, you're going to have to clip a curved seam. I'm guessing that I'm clipping it right. And the deeper the curve, the more clips you need. Okay, you want to clip up to the line, but not through the line. And one of our favorite things to use is a pressing ham. Okay, here's a pressing ham. They come in different sizes. Here's a small one. Here's a portable one. And that's pretty much it. Okay, there's like 2 different sizes of pressing hams. This one's a little bit smaller, not much. And they have different places where they're slightly different shape. You can make your own ham like this. However, I could never get them firm enough for my liking. See, this is the one I don't like because it's got that funky little curve there. And seeing if it won't go over any place else, you can always use a portable one. And this is one that I made. I have a pattern instructions on how to do it. So when I send out the email with the handouts, I'll send you this, and it shows how to make this kind of pressing mitt. And one's I put Teflon fabric on one side, and the other one I used wool. This inside. Move these. Even this isn't quite enough turn, but over here I pressed it closed flat, and then change hands, and then you would press it open. There. Now to get this deep curve, you need something more than these. These are really handy because of the fact that they're portable. This is one like when I was a costume designer, when they were behind stage, and they always needed a little press because they'd come in crying because they had a big wrinkle because they sat down someplace. Then we used to walk around with a portable steam iron, and we'd have this on our hands, and you could put it on either side depending on what the fabric was, and we would like literally take this and press it while it was on their clothes. I have been known, and if you were with when you'd come to the live classes, when we were in person, there were a couple times at work where I'd get water on me. I'd go wash my hands. I would do this and dress. I don't. Did he look at me like, "Are you crazy?" Well, yeah, I am. But hams are nice because you can get it to any shape. Like a lot of times, you've got a princess seam. If you're going to sew a dart, then you would want to use a ham. So if your dart was shaped this way, you would put it near the end and you would press it. So hams are really nice, particularly if you're a garment sewer. I have this one little tool that I absolutely love. It's called the tailor's board, and it's for like almost anything. There's not a shape on here that you really can't find. It has covers that you can put on it, but I don't ever put them on there. Put the little cover, but I don't use it. But I do use it with the wood. I've got virtually any shape I could want. Okay, here's one I could fit this here. And open it and press this. Wrong side. This is where that little clover one would come in handy, actually. And then you could get it right over the tighter the curve, you can go ahead and get this really, except I can't see it. I could put the other glasses on, but I don't know where I put them.
Sherry, one more time, what is this thing called?
It's called the tailor board, and I got this from Nancy's.
Tailor board, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You can make them yourself, but whenever you're making pressing things, don't use pine. How to press this, and like I said, this is where that little. If it was even deeper, I've got a deeper one here. Here's an even deeper curve. I can really get in there and get these little tiny curves and be real precise. There, like I said, there's not a shape this thing can't handle. Here's this really tight thing right here. So I could slip this in here and get a lot of this pressed. I'm not going to press it closed, but see, you can get this really tight. And that's a very tight point. These are great. Like I said, used them mostly when I was garment sewing. What I like about the wooden ones is that when you turn it over, you don't see, you won't see the iron marks because it's just going to press that seam. These are great for, I did a collar. Here's a collar. So like this one here, well, here, this one, this one's even littler. Yeah, I used the wrong one. Look how tight I can get close. This says almost literally to that point. I can get even closer, right to the point. One is good for collars. So if I wanted to press that, won't open. See, I can clip this collar, I can press this collar. But see, that gets that collar. You're not fighting everything to try to press the collar. It has a built-in point turner. Another piece of equipment that's really good is a sleeve roll. Here's a sleeve roll, and these are the same thing. It's a ham, but it's really good if you're doing a sleeve that you would just simply, if you don't have one of these, it's no big deal. You can actually use a rolled up towel. Okay, and then you have your sleeve, and you can get into it really, because it's a curved surface, like this is a knit. Okay, so I press that, and then when you put it on the right side, you're not going to see the pressing lines. Let's see. Yeah, you don't see the pressing lines.
Mm,
Let's see.
that's nice.
So, whereas if I take this and press this on a flat
Yeah.
surface, I will see the pressing lines. These are nice to have. Again, you can make your own. They're easy enough to make, but I like the firmness of them that you don't get. That's why I don't like to use a towel, because a towel doesn't get firm enough. Another thing I like for tubes or sleeves, especially, is this thing. It's called a seam, what's it called? A seam stick. But you can get, if you can get these at Lowe's, you can, but you want to make sure it's a hardwood, and you may have to sand it. And I do have to, if I use a lot of steam, I'm going to have to take some, super fine sandpaper to sand the grain out of it. What I like about this is, again, we were talking about anytime you've got a curved surface and you press, it's just going to press the seam itself, and you get none of the marking. It's sort of like it's like a hard version of a seam, what do you call it, sleeve ham. On tube, something really little, you can actually, as long as it can fit inside there, you can get that seam. I use this a lot on purses, because a lot of time when and you can even use the flat side too, but like if you're trying to sew a purse and you can't get it flat on the table to press, press any of the seams open or close so that it looks nice, you can stuff this inside and press it. So this has come out really handy, and I really like this. And this,
Okay, what is that called again?
this is called a seam stick, but you can get these at Lowe's. It's a half of they sell half pieces of wood, half circle.
Half
And
round.
this one is just more expensive because they routed a hole to hang it up. No, I think it's like 2 inches in diameter. It's considered a 2-inch. They sell them already in half. I mean, they may be sharp on the edges and you have to sand it, but you don't want to put a finish on it. You don't want to put any polyurethane or anything on it. Just leave it plain. You don't even you don't want to oil it, because, just if you feel the grain pulling up, just get some, what do they call it? 300 or 500 grain sandpaper and just give it a sand once in a while. And I've had this thing, well, it's a phone number. There's no website. That's how old it is. It was before internet. This is probably from the 1970s when I had the costuming business. So that's when and I've had it for years, but I think I've seen them on the internet, and they are nice to have. Okay, but like I said, this comes in very, very useful. Okay, let's see what's next in my toy basket. Pressing cloths. There's different kinds of press cloths. If you have to press on the front side, you should use a press cloth. I lost the end. There's different kinds. This one is by June. This one is, well, these are actually ones I got at quilt shops, and these are silicone, but you can also find them in the kitchen section because these are the exact same things that you could do cookies on. Probably wouldn't put cookies on the ones I sew with. And they come in different sizes. This is a big one. So I like these. I use these a lot. And then there's this other kind that is made of also, I don't know what it's made out of, but these are by June Taylor. And they also come in different size, and you can cut them whatever size you need them. I have one that's humongous. This one actually was one big one. It was like way too big, okay? So I cut it in half. In fact, this is too big. I think I'm gonna cut it again. But these are my first choices to use these, which are silicone. And again, you can also bake cookies on them. Another thing, if you don't have either one of those, this stuff, I've had it for years. That's called pressing paper. It looks a lot like freezer paper. It's got a shiny side. Other pressing tools which are helpful. Does it help? These have always come with my ironing boards. Using this all the time over here because this might help me from dropping them on the floor. I'm always afraid they get too hot, but they don't. So, but that's a nice one. And another wooden toy that's a real good thing to have is a clapper. Okay, these are what they call clappers. Again, it's made out of wood. You can use any piece of wood. What makes this one fancy is it's got the little handles. And again, this one is in need of some ironing, some sanding down. But this is great. I've even started seeing quilters use these because, what is this? Okay. You would press it. You press whatever you're going to do. And then while it's still hot, you put this on top of it and just let it sit till it cools. Then it gives you a nice crisp edge. I don't know, it like works magic, but it gives you a really good crease. And this is called a clapper. And I like these. I've had this for years too. This I think I bought the same time I bought my stick 100 years ago. This is great for wools. When you've got a really thick seam, super thick seam that you are trying to flatten and you can't, especially if it's like you're making a jacket or something woolen, you're going to hit it with some hot steam, like put the iron above it and shoot the steam into it. Then push this down and really push hard. You can also, what this is also designed for is when you've got a really thick part of a seam, like a pocket or something that's really thick wool, that's why it's called a clapper. You beat on it. And you pound the seam flat, which is what they do in old tailoring. In fact, this one might have been my mother's. I don't even remember. She had all that stuff. Okay. Oh, here was one of those pressing mats this actually came with one of those pull down irons, the kinds you press, but I don't use it either. I didn't keep that. I got rid of that a long time ago. Okay. Velvet board. Okay. In fact, I have another one somewhere that's a pin board that's made out of pins, but this was my mother's, okay, for years ago. It's for pressing velvet. And here's a piece of velvet. You would put it face down and press from the back, and it doesn't mar. You never push hard, With velvet, you always just steam and let it go. You can use another piece of velvet. So put in a piece of velvet face up and a piece of velvet face down. It does pretty much the same thing. Does it work as well? Not quite. This is designed that these piles are almost sticking straight up. There's also something called a pin board, which is made of tiny little pins. That's if you're dealing with those really thick plush velvets. But you know, I don't do that anymore, and I don't think I had one. I don't think I have it anymore. I haven't seen it for years. Other thing that's nice to have is this is for doing hems. They have them made out of silicone as well. And this side is for curves, so you can take your curve and measure it out. And then this one is for, so you say if you wanted a 1-inch seam, you would put this underneath, put the fabric wrong side up and measure that. This would be easier if I were left-handed with this iron here. Okay, and then
I use
press
it
it.
all the time.
Yeah,
I love this tool.
you can make your own out of freezer paper. Works too, where you just take your freezer paper, several layers of it, fold it, and mark it. So they have them now in silicone. This is again from the night. Oh yeah, this is old. It says Bishop method on it. So I'd say a good 50 years old easily. I had Bishop method in high school and hated it. So,
Hey, Jerry,
yeah,
come back to that and show me how you would do a curve.
we wanted this to be a curve seam.
Right.
Okay, you would sort of like, you would start at one end and sort of push it. Should put this iron on the other side. Okay, say that, okay, 5/8 inch seam, where it's giving a 5/8 inch hem. And you
Okay.
would just turn this and keep rotating this. And you'd use steam. This one isn't going to curve. This would be good on a wool or something that's going to be curved. And you tilt it as you go along.
Hmm. Okay,
So if you wanted to keep on going, you would come over here. Well, you would just keep following your seam up and all the way around. This is a flat piece, not going into a curve, but you get the idea. Your piece would be curved as well. Or
okay,
you could even or close to it. You could even take, and this is about what say if you were doing a curved seam, like if you had a blouse that was curved at the bottom, this you would just follow it along and just
okay,
press it.
but the material is cut as a curve.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Okay.
the material would have a curve, because what you
Okay.
usually would take your ruler here and ruler here and ruler here and ruler here and keep going around. So this is your ruler here, and then you just rotate the ruler as this curves around, you would rotate the ruler.
Okay, well, that's okay, because I don't do garment sewing, but I was just curious.
But I have to hem things anyway. I mean, I don't do too much garment sewing anymore, but when I've got to hem everything because I'm so daggone short.
Hmm.
This
Yeah.
is a neat pressing cloth. Okay, this I got from Nancy's Notions. It's like this was, I was still at Maryland Sewing Vac when I got this. It's called a Raja cloth, R-A-J-A-H. I got it from Nancy's Notions. It's treated with a chemical. So sometimes if you have a fabric that you want to permanently pleat or permanently fold, like pants, like a lot of times you buy pants and they have a beautiful curve in them. And then where's my water bottle? Here it is. What you do is you take your pressed cloth and mist it. And now when it's steamed out, then what happens is it gives it a permanent pleat that won't wash out. Now it may soften up, but it won't wash out. This pleat is now permanent. This is also good. Like if I press it, it won't come out. See, it'll still leave the mark. Okay, if I press, see, I don't know if you can see it. See, the mark is still there. Okay, if
Mhm.
I want to
Yeah.
get rid, like a lot of times you buy fabric and it's got that crease down the middle and you can't get rid of it. These are really
Yeah.
good to erase that crease, because in order to, you want to wet it again, take this and you use it as a press cloth. This is good for up to 1,000 uses.
Wow.
Says you can use this up to 1,000 times. And you can wash it in cold water if it gets too dirty.
Wow.
And now that crease is gone.
Wow.
This is what, getting the creases out of fabric is what I mostly use this for these days. And I have a few of them. But I have been using this same cloth for nearly 20 years. I
Good.
bought like 3 of them. So just in case it didn't last long, I had to have it. Because what I like to use this for, and this was another one of these days I might do a piece on this. This is a pleater board. Let me get this.
Yeah.
Okay, that I actually made myself. Okay, because I was doing when I was doing dance costumes, I did whole yardage, and a pleater board, if you buy them about this big, what good is that? It was no good to me at all. So how you use this thing, let me get a little piece of fabric. Oop. Okay. You take your fabric. This would be from the right side. And a lot of this is also what I use this for. Because you take this and you line it up and you push it in. Okay. Then you open the next one and you push it in. And again, push it in. Okay, then you take the Raja cloth.
How do you spell that again?
Raja, like Maharaja, it's R-A-J-A-H.
Okay.
And it's got a chemical in it. So you do want to test it. You never know when a chemical is going to react with a dye. So always test it. And then I'm going to press it. Back in the day when everybody wanted those little tiny pleats in their skirts.
Mm.
Or if you bought one and then you washed it and all the pleats were gone. That's happened to me. You let it cool completely. And now your pleats are permanent.
Oh, that's awesome.
It always pleated it really well. I have this always behind my door, hung up on a skirt hanger. But it's 45 inches wide so that I can accommodate a whole roll of fabric. Here's another toy. This thing is great for if you have something you need to measure evenly, whether
Yeah.
it's doing pleats, marking buttons, marking embroidery. This is nice to have because then you can measure it. I use it mostly on blouses. When I'm making blouses, I decide I want, say, 5 or 6 buttons, and I just take it. There's the top button, there's the bottom button, and I mark them all in between at one time.
Mm.
Okay. And in quilting, where this stuff is to make is bias bars or stems for my quilt, or even binding. I have these little clover bias makers in different sizes. This is the largest I've ever seen. It's 50 millimeters, about 8 finishes. This is good if you're wanting to make quilt binding that you want to sew on. Quilt bind, the double, actually for single fold. And how you do this, got a wedge into it, put it right sides down. Usually it helps to spray this with spray starch first. Then it stays, because a lot of times it doesn't want to stay. Then you take a pin or a seam ripper or something, scissor end, push it through. And then you start to press it. And a lot of times it helps to stick a pin, use glass-headed pins when you do this. And then take your iron and then I just pull it through. Does not have to be a bias. This says bias trim maker, but it doesn't have to be biased. This is a piece of straight grain. And then once it's pressed, again, I will usually put a layer of spray starch on here. And then it gives you a really nice, helps not to twist it there, piece of bias if you wanted to use it. This isn't bias, but you would know how, this is how you would do it. There's also something for quilters called bias bars. And they have different sizes. They come in different sizes depending on how big you want them to be. They come like this. You would take your fabric and you would sew it wrong sides together. And then you would clip it close. I'm not going to clip any closer than that. Put your these bars inside. They make them in both silicone and metal. Metal is nice. I think you get a better crease with the metal. However, you gotta be careful. It will burn your fingers. And then you put the seam right down the center up and press it. Works like the seam stick, but smaller. And I probably could have clipped this closer. I could still do it. This way you don't have to turn it, especially if you're going to be applicating. Then I would trim some more. I didn't trim it enough. Well, this side I did. This side I trimmed enough. This side I didn't. And so now this bias piece is ready to be used. Again, this is not a piece of bias, but they come in as little as 1/8 of an inch thick. However, if you ever need bias that's 1/8 of an inch thick,
Yeah.
I do instead is I take the 1/4 inch one, cut it, and then fold it again, and it works just as well. So I do a lot with applique. I do a lot of bias. They're good for stems and all kinds of stuff. So let's see, anything else that I have? Probably, I don't remember. I don't think, oh, this is a handy little tool that I have fallen in love with. It's called a dauber, and you can't buy them. You gotta make them yourself. And you take a piece of wool, a scrap piece of wool, about maybe 10 inches long and however big you want it. Okay, and then you take it and you dip it in there. And then as you want to steam something down, then you would just simply dab it on top. And then it's if you want to just get a little spot, a little place that you wanted just that little place wet, that works really well. This I use a lot. And the more you use it, the more felted this gets at the top, but it's just a piece of scrap that I've rolled up and I've just whip stitched it closed. I didn't even do the top, just so, and it'll get tighter and smaller as you use it. The more you use it, the more firm it becomes. And it's like a bingo dauber to spot, get a little spot. These are nice for garment sewing too. Quilters, we normally will sew your seams. You press them flat and then you either open them or press them to one side. And the problem is that with quilting, no two blocks are the same. Or you say you need a 12-inch block, but when you're done, it's 11 3/4 and it's gonna throw it off. Or it's 12 1/4 and you need to shrink it. Actually, what you can do is you can set up a grid and you would draw it, freezer paper, and put it on your ironing board and measure it so that, and you make your mark, say it has to be 12 inches. And I need a piece of fabric that's bigger or smaller. Okay. So you would take, let me just make this a little bit. Making it bigger is easier than smaller. And this, again, I've got to, this isn't my idea, this is Sharon Schomburg's idea. And it's called squaring up a block. And I think I've shown this before. But what you do is you would wet it with spray starch. I'm just going to use water for now. And then you would take it in the center and pin it. Pin it to your mat or your ironing board, and then make it so that it's exactly the size that you need it. And see, this needs to be stretched out some. So you would, while it's wet, the fibers will relax. So you would keep on pinning it like every half an inch or so. I'll just do a few edges of it. Okay, and you would, the reason you're going to use, you would use spray starch as versus just water is that the spray starch is going to make it stay. So the wetness allows it to stretch to make it bigger. And we'll talk about getting smaller later. Okay, you stretch it as much as it go. Now this, I was pushing it, trying to do a half an inch on a piece that small, but you would take, did I put this? I put the spray starch away already. So, and then you would take a press cloth, and we'll pretend that's a press cloth, and you use glass-headed pins. And then then you would press it dry, and because it has starch, it's going to stay.
Can
If
you
you have a bigger piece, you wouldn't be doing this small.
Can we use the Terra Magic?
No, you want spray starch. Terra Magic is going to
Okay.
stiffen it up immediately, but I want it to be able to sink into the fibers because you want it to stay. Terra Magic, I have it, for one thing, Terra Magic is sticky. It's going to
Yeah.
stick your fingers, and it's going to be, you're going to be going, yuck, yuck, yuck. Okay,
Okay.
but see, I stretched this one about 1/4 of an inch. This side, I was trying to do a half. That was a little much. But on a 12-inch square, you can really stretch or shrink up to an inch. Now, if you wanted this to be, say it was too big, and you wanted to shrink it, you would do the opposite. You would take it again, let's just make it smaller. Then again, you're going to put it along, start at your centers. And it's not going to shrink that much up. Helps to go here in the middle. All right, or start on one end, or it's, okay, and then do the ends. This is the opposite. You would start at the end pieces, the 4 corners. Okay. And then you would, every time you'd put in a pin, you would half the bulk. You know, so you got a little bulk here, a little bulk there. Same thing here and here. And this way bends your pin. Don't use the flimsy pins, not with this mat anyway. And then every time you put in a pin, half the bulk. Whatever it is, put it in half. Okay, I'm just going to do that much, because this one has to be left overnight. Then you're going to saturate it with the spray starch and let it go away. Let it dry naturally, because the spray starch is going to, the water in the spray starch is going to shrink the fabric. But then when you come back a couple hours later, then you'll see it has really lost a lot of its fullness. And if you need, and you just keep spraying it until it's relatively flat. Then you're going to take a press cloth with one more light spray of spray starch and press it, and then the spray starch makes it stay. So you can either shrink or make a block bigger. A 12-inch block you can make bigger or smaller by another inch. The more loosely woven, the better it's going to stretch or shrink. Batiks are too tightly woven, they're not going to shrink or grow as much as the others. But it works really well. And I've got a link in there. There's videos from Sharon Schomburg that says how she does that. And I'll put the links or it'll be in the handout. Talking about quilting. Same thing, like say if you did a quilt that you put more quilting on the middle of it and the outside of it, the borders are ripply, you can do the same thing. Before you bind it, what you would do is saturate the parts that are ripply and then let them dry. If you've got and if you want to stretch out the middle, again, you wet it and then you pull it and pull it and pull it and tack it down. That's why I bought all those T-pins that I have. Clear the living room. And when you're essentially blocking a quilt, and it works the same way, but the secret with fabric versus yarn is the fact that you're going to put the spray starch in there, and the starch is going to make it stay. Same thing, you can shrink the borders on the sides as well as expand the middle and have a nice flat quilt. It's just you would start in the middle and pull it open and press it with a press cloth and dry it. And then you're going to wet the outside and leave it. So the borders. So yes, there's a way. Pressing is amazing what you can do with a little bit of steam. I always tell everybody, oh, that didn't work out. Steam it into submission. It's amazing what steam will do to fabric.
I hope you enjoyed our discovering all things about pressing. And if you would like a pattern, written instructions on how to make your own personal pressing mitt, then send me an email at waltzquilt@yahoo.com. I have 2 tip sheets on how to improve your pressing with all kinds of links to videos, other videos, and also all of the tricks that we talked about tonight. So if you have any questions, send me an email at waltzquilt@yahoo.com, and I will be happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week. Bye.